several executives sold off large shares of stock, while mainstream media tells its audience to invest in them. On March 9th, the day before the collapse, Israel's two largest banks pulled up to $1 billion out of SVB, while Peter Thiel's Founders Fund withdrew millions and advised their clients to do the same. The next day, there was a run on the bank, and Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Is this evidence of a controlled demolition or a hasty one? The day before the collapse, a U.S. judge ordered J.P. Morgan Chase to turn over documents in a lawsuit accusing them of aiding in Jeffrey Epstein's operation. The team behind this lawsuit was the same team who successfully exposed the involvement of Deutsche Bank, and they subpoenaed several other banks they believe were involved, including Silicon Valley Bank and Bank Leumi, the Israeli bank that drained $1 billion out of SVB the day before it collapsed. Whatever the reason, the U.S. government's response threatens to collapse the world economy. The FDIC insures up to $250,000 for each depositor, but now they are going to cover all depositor losses. And they don't have enough to cover the $175 billion of SVB losses, let alone the trillions of dollars to be lost on the near horizon as banks across the world begin to break. The systemic risk among GSIBs, global systemically important banks, is that they are so deeply connected that when one falls, they will all follow. Much of the world's economy is already collapsing due to the actions of the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve banking system. And much of the world has been preparing for the end of the U.S. dollar as a world reserve currency. After all the smaller banks die, the people will be left with the central bank, and their solution is the CBDC. CBDC stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. With CBDC, there are no more options. Everyone's account is run directly through the central bank system.
As the financial system gets more controlling and more invasive, it's a little bit like bringing up a corral around us. And CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and vaccine passports or digital IDs are sort of the last shutting of the gate. It's hard for many people to imagine the risks here because we're so used to living with financial transaction freedom, and we don't understand that when this gate closes on us, we literally will be sitting in a system where the central banks believe that our assets belong to them, and they can dictate where we can spend money and what we can spend money on. If you don't behave, you can have your money turned off.
There are 12 Federal Reserve banks, which are located in cities being considered for the 15-minute city model of the World Economic Forum. This is where it's all headed, and there isn't much pushback in the federal government. Utah Senator Mike Lee introduced the No CBDC Act last September, which will likely go nowhere. But we, the people, have much more sway over our local governments. An Oklahoma House committee unanimously passed a bill to protect Oklahomans from being forced to adopt a CBDC. It's time for we the people to unite with our neighbors and local communities and to prepare to liberate ourselves from the central bank system. Recall our corrupt county officials and start looking into local barter and trade systems, because central bank digital currency is coming at us quickly and it equals financial enslavement.
So how does facial recognition work, right? When you pick up many of the smartphones today have a 3D camera in the front. And what happens is that 3D camera has a little bit of a laser or an LED invisible projector that projects a dot pattern on your face or some sort of other pattern. And then that pattern gets uniquely distorted for every person's face. And then there's an invisible light camera that picks up that distortion and then is able to identify key points on your face and uniquely identify that, this is Aman or this is Maria. So that's how facial recognition works. And it's been sold to us as a benefit because it's very convenient. I don't have to punch in a 4 or 6 digit code into my phone every time I want to use it, right?
Yes.
So that's how facial recognition was introduced to the world.
And many of these so-called technological advancements have been introduced under the guise of convenience, but what they're actually leading to is, as you said, a digital prison.
That's right. And so So they give us the carrots, right? If you go back 20, 25 years, consumer electronics, computers, cell phones, and other gadgets, video games, they're all kind of subsidized, very low cost so that they are able to permeate every corner of society. So like even, people who are not very well off, they have all these gadgets. So they're sold to us as the carrots. And it's for convenience and it's also for safety and security. Right, and it's to catch the bad guys, and as a society, we tend to kind of accept all the carrots. But by the end of the presentation, or even halfway through it, you'll see how the sticks are coming if we don't watch out. And they've already started, and most people are, they don't know what's coming.
Indeed.
So if you go to China, Big Brother has already met Big Data, right? They already have facial recognition, which is connected to social credit scoring, and that directly lends itself to a control system. And they've already announced it in China for many years. I was in Shenzhen, China in 2019, 3 years ago, for an optical conference. And every corner you go, intersections, streets, buildings, indoors, outdoors, are just littered with cameras. And there are screens everywhere, and they are telling you that we are watching you. And we are watching you, and you will be okay with us watching you all the time. And so people have become very compliant in China, right? And so you can then control the social credit system. It's like a feedback system on how people behave. And this is how compliance has been achieved in China. Now, they're already doing this in the Western countries. It's just that they haven't told us yet. So our social scoring has already started. Our carbon tracking has already started. I was in India recently, and when I got my receipt from United Airlines, it had a carbon footprint of 3.3 tons each way on the receipt. So
Yes, the conditioning's already started, and we're talking here in Australia about banks starting to notify you about your carbon footprint on your transactions. So that conditioning, you're absolutely right. We're already in that system.
That's right. Right. So but the narrative in the Western media is that, privacy and freedom have gone in China, right? And the social credit system is a control system in China, and implicitly we in the West are free. But that's really not the case. But the narrative is there, and it gives people the illusion that all the surveillance being put up in our cities and our towns in the Western countries is for security and safety of the people. But what is not said is that per capita cameras in America are greater than in China. We have 50 million tethered surveillance cameras in the United States connected to the internet and therefore to AI. And by 2025, $2 trillion would have been spent on cameras and the surveillance infrastructure of smart cities. Right? London is ranked number 3 in the world in terms of number of cameras per 1,000 people. Right? So the infrastructure is in place and is expanding. So if people, look up and they keep their, wits about them and go out in your towns and cities, you'll see more and more surveillance infrastructure being set up, and it'll all be sold on the pretext of safety and security of the people.
I didn't know London was ranked number 3. That's very interesting.
That's right. And New Delhi, India is ranked number 1 in terms of cameras per square mile.
Wow.
So there are well over 500,000 cameras in the city of Delhi. So just think about that.